Welcome back to the course Privacy and Security in Online Social Media. This is week 4, part 3. We're continuing to look at fake news as the threat, fake news, credibility, misinformation. This topic is quite exciting, as you would have seen. I'm sure in the process of looking at the lectures itself, you would realize that the fake news penetration is very high. So we will see actually some more interesting ideas that are connected to fake news, why it is working. Mostly this part we will look at why these fake news spreads and what is the kind of work that people have done in terms of studying why this spreads. And as always, feel free to send your questions in the discourse. The first word that we want to study is this idea called as partisanship. Okay. The term is used for persons who strongly support their party's policies and are reluctant to compromise with political opponents. So this idea of one party, I support this party, and I so to say aggressively, judiciously, religiously, very, very adamantly follow the political party, and I disagree with whatever my opponent's party says. Right? I mean, some of these times these are also like polarization, right? Heavy inclination towards a topic, and you're kind of aligned to one particular ideology, one particular party, and you are finding it, you will not accept any other party's views. That's partisanship. Let's see how partisanship actually connects to fake news also. Voting with stars, analyzing partisanship engagement between celebrities and politicians in India. So this idea of how this partisanship in political parties in India, this is what they studied. They looked at actually 1,400 sportsmen and entertainers and politicians. They had these two sets of sides, which is one side the politicians, the other side the sportsmanship and entertainers. And what they tried studying was they tried studying how the interactions are, which is with 1,400 sportsmanship, engagement with 1,000 of the most followed ruling party and opposition party politicians. The paper basically tried analyzing the interactions again. For us, the interaction, this is on Twitter, which is retweet, like, comment, reply, right? All of them. Follow. Right. The paper presents a new method to measure partisanship of celebrities along different modes of engagement. Different modes of engagement is this. Right. I mean, these kind of understanding of how the interactions happen with these sets of people can be very useful in terms of how the information is flowing itself, right? For example, we talked about before in one of the weeks, if there's a given graph of interactions of Twitter, let's take this is how the edges of a graph is. If I were to spread the information from here to here, right, to any parts of the graph, what is the best way to spread the information? Right. If I understand the engagement between, that's what they are trying to do, right? If I understand the engagement between two sets, let's assume that these are, let's take these are politicians, and these are the entertainers. Not necessarily that it's going to be like this, some graph like this, if you have it. how the information is flowing in the graph may be very, very useful to study fake news spread also. Right? That's the idea. So the tweet here, it says, hearty congratulations to Team India for successive series victory against West Indies, at the rate, hashtag, Barabati Monday International, and tagging the cricketer, right? So all of this is the tweet. Politician is actually mentioning the cricketer, right? So this is what we said about engagement. Politician mentioning the sportsman. Right. 90% of the engagement tweets with athletes belong to the style of messaging, which is the case about talking about the match, congratulating the team, congratulating the individual. Those are the things that were happening 90% of the time. 68% of the times were with entertainers, and it could be the playback singer, music directors, actresses, all of that. Right? Partisanship is the idea of believing in one of your political parties and not accepting any other political party's views. Celebrities were, so this is just a conclusion that the paper had, which is BJP engages with celebrities, whereas Congress politicians tweet about range of topics that criticize the celebrities. These are all paraphrased from the paper. Feel free to, so here is a paper in case if you're interested, feel free to go take a look at the paper. And if you have any questions in terms of methodology, data, inferences, feel free to come back and feel free to post it. The other idea, which is actually a more relevant, more important idea, is this crowdsourcing, which is a process of aggregating crowd wisdom to solve a problem. Crowdsourcing, if you remember, once I talked about Mechanical Turk. If you want to do some small task, which is take an image, find out whether there are cars in the image, whether there are a bicycle in the image, or given an image, whether you want to find out whether it's a fake news, whether it has morphed images. All of that, you'll go to this platform called Mechanical Turk, and you'll add a task there to say that, look, anybody who takes an image, annotates it, and if they do 100 of them, I'll give them 10 rupees. Right? So 10 rupees. Right? So now this kind of small task, no expertise required. Just look at the image and say whether there's cat or not. If there's a cat, annotate which part of the image has a cat. Such kind of tasks, you get it through Mechanical Turk. This idea itself is called crowdsourcing, right? I'm sourcing my solutions through a crowd, right? That's the idea, a process of aggregating crowd wisdom to solve a problem. The wisdom is finding a cat in the image. Okay? A huge amount of studies have been done in this space, even questioning how reliable using Mechanical Turk itself is a, so to say, direction that people are pursuing. Whether this method of crowdsourcing through a platform like Mechanical Turk, how valuable it is, how reliable the results would be. Because, for example, one of the big concerns is that the kind of users who use this, right? If there's a bias in terms of the users that use Mechanical Turk, right? There's only certain type of users who use Mechanical Turk, then the results are also going to be that biased. in mechanical Turk, can you get a statistically representative sample for all features that you're looking for, all demographics? Maybe very hard, right? If you were to think about, let's take a Tamilian living in Delhi who has greater than a master's degree and does, let's take, work on topic X. Right? If you, I'm just making it up, that if you want to have a participants which has this category of demographics, it's going to be very hard, right? It's going to be very hard to get such kind of demographics in these platforms. And of course, the bias towards, this is the bias about getting a certain type of demographics. If the demographics of Mechanical Turk is all very similar, then the results are also going to be biased. Right, so here are some papers which looks at will the crowd game the algorithm, using layperson judgments to combat misinformation, scaling up fact-checking using wisdom of crowds. Both of this is super relevant to the topic that we are looking at, which is misinformation and layperson. Here it is fact-checking and wisdom of crowds. So interestingly, these kind of results actually conclude that even though the layperson has less skills to identify, understand, figure out whether it's a fake news or not, layman's and common crowdsourcing methods actually solve the problem better. Benefits to flag a misinformation content. Platform can downrank the flagged content so fewer users see it. Warnings reduce belief and sharing. So if you start putting warnings, right? There's an image, there's a tweet, and then there is a warning saying that, oh, look, this is actually a fake. We'll see in the next week, we'll actually see some implementation of these kind of methods. Just a nudge, right? Just an intervention which shows that, look, this is image, the post that is being done on Twitter, this image is actually fake. If this nudge is given, users are going to actually start believing this information lesser. That's what platform can downrank the flagged content, which is if I search for, let's take if this had hashtag India, if I search for hashtag India on Twitter, this tweet can be shown at the lower rank. Warnings reduce belief and sharing. I talked about warning just now. Right? But what is the real issue? But it doesn't scale, right? Fact checkers can't keep up with the vast quantity of content posted every day. The problem with the social media is that the content is getting generated by anyone and everyone, right? Meaning, in the past newspaper, it's the journalist, it's the credibility of the newspaper, all of that was there. Today, you could easily do a post about something which is not credible. On the contrary, you could also post something that is very credible. Wisdom of crowds. Approach can scale up fact-checking, which is, can you actually get the crowd to start annotating for you anytime a new content that shows up on Twitter, new news article on the platform, can you push it to hundreds of thousands of people, get them to check, and then they actually annotate it saying whether it is true or false, real or fake, and then that gets used to make a choice by the system for nudging, for ranking, all of that. Right? Approach can scale. but would such layperson ratings actually generate useful insight into the accuracy of the content being rated? This paper and many other literature shows that it is possible. A large literature shows that even if the ratings of the individuals, layperson, are noisy and ineffective, aggregating these responses can lead to highly accurate crowd judgments. So in last part of this course, we'll actually talk about computational social science as a topic. We'll talk about there an idea called mass collaboration. Right? Which is how can you actually get large problems solved by crowdsourcing and by collaborating with hundreds and thousands of people, getting them to actually help you solve the problem. Simple things like annotating is one of the simplest things that you can think of, but there are more harder things also you can actually think of addressing. The next idea is called implied truth effect. Tendency to believe false information to be correct after repeated exposure. This is probably a large effect that we are seeing in social now, right? Particularly the older generation people, which is the message comes from for your parent. The message comes from friend 1, and then friend 2 says it, friend 3 says it in a different group, and then friend 4 said it to friend 3, and then that came to your parent. There's a large belief that all this that is said is actually true. That's what the idea for implied truth effect means, which is just because you're being exposed to so many times, it is assumed that it's true. The implied truth effect, attaching warnings to a subset of fake news headlines, increased perceived accuracy of headlines without warnings. Right? This is like the traditional way of solving the problem, right? You take the problem of fake news, show some people some annotations like what I said, don't have the annotation for a set of people, do some experiments with these two participants and show that, look, people who saw this, let's take, if you were to draw a graph of this as dotted lines, right? The people who saw the warnings before the study and after the study, they were able to actually identify the fake news messages better, whereas the people who did not get any warnings, they were both together at the same way, but they were not able to identify which is they fell for. They said most of the things were actually fake, right? Or they couldn't identify whether it was fake or real. They thought that all of them were real. Right? So these kind of effects, right? Simple, again, let me repeat this graph, which is probably I said few things which is embedded here. The idea here is that I took two conditions. One is, let's say, experimental condition. One is a control condition where there is no warning, which is the same as what it is today. And we made them look at some messages and we showed them the intervention, which is or a nudge that this information, this tweet that you're looking at is fake. That information is present in their tweet. For them, it is not. Now, when you compare them, which is when you compare them of how they find whether the information is fake or not, people who see the nudge tend to identify the fake news better. That's the idea. Right. So you need this group. so that you can control. But this is also the status quo group, right? Which is how it is today. Twitter doesn't show any nudge with the tweet. Again, feel free to take a look at the paper if you're interested. So if you clearly see, I'm just going to mark some of it for your benefit. If you see in study 1, we find that although warnings do lead to modest reduction in perceived accuracy of false headlines relative to a control condition, we also observe that hypothesized implied truth effect, the presence of warnings caused untagged headlines to be seen as more accurate than the control. So that's the key for us. And this again, another MTurk study, we find that the same effect in the context of decisions about which headlines to consider sharing on social media. Right? Now that the users are able to identify that this is a fake, they decide whether they want to share it or not. So Mechanical Turk is a very, very effective tool for these kind of studies. It's essentially same as if you do a survey, send it to your friends and ask them to fill and collect, right? It's essentially the same, but it's just that here you're getting a large pool of users to help you. And of course, there's some charges with it. How can platform fight, right? If you see to partner with professional fact checkers and put warning labels on articles that are found to be false, an implied truth effect whereby false headlines that fail to get tagged are considered validated and thus are seen to be more accurate. So essentially, if you start doing the if you start doing the warning labels, by the way, there's even a separate study called warning signs, right? The stop sign, left turn sign, what size it should be, what color it should be, where it should be the bend, right? So all of this hospital, right? These kind of signs that we see, SIGNS by the way, as signs in it. A lot of work goes on in figuring out what the signs should be, right? And the interesting thing about this is like aeroplane pilots, if you look at the number of buttons that they have and things that they have to do in the cockpit is so high. Those are the areas that these warning signs have become so much advanced from where I think areas like computer science should study. So if you start doing warning labels more effectively, then the problem is that if a post does not have a warning, right, there is implied effect that, oh, this is actually true. But the problem is that it could have been just missed by the method that we used for tagging or warning. Meaning, in other sense, these are true positives and false negative problems, which is to say that some of the true messages are showed as fake, and some of the fake messages are showed as true. Then the other thing that is very critical for sort of say fake news spread is the digital illiteracy. Particularly in India, if you see this problem is actually playing a bigger role, right? A lack of ability and skills to create, evaluate, learn, and find information on online media and digital platforms through the usage of technology. That's the digital, that's the literacy part. If I ask you to do a few things, can you actually quickly do it using online platforms and how well can you do versus how well can somebody do it in a developed country. That's the direct comparison if you were to make it. So some data about digital literacy, but in India, I think the broader data that is available is generally the literacy rate. So population, literacy rate in India, literacy rate in urban much higher, literacy rate in rural is slightly lower than the urban. But again, please remember these are literacy rates in general. Digital literacy, there are not statistics about across the country. There are some studies which gives you some pointers, which is what we tried capturing here, which is according to the Indian National Statistical Office, a digital literate person, this is a definition of the India organization, National Statistical Office. A digital literate person is at least 5 years old and can navigate the internet via a web browser, use email, and find, evaluate, and communicate information using social media tools. 55% of Indians have access to broadband. Only 20% have the ability to use the internet. Only 4.4% of the rural households own computers, out of which only 14% can have a computer with an internet connection, stated the data from NSSO. Right? So it's kind of a low, but of course this is growing. I mean, I think in terms of the internet access today, I think India probably ranks very, very high in terms of the number of people who access internet, number of things that we are able to do it online. We are in a good path, but we need to get better. So some campaign government initiatives, which is Digital India, is a campaign launched by Government of India to ensure that the government services are made available. Essentially, all the services that are created by the government, it goes to the end user immediately, right? That is the effect of Digital India, right? You want to make sure that it's not going hops. The government releases fund to go to the village, it goes to some account, and then the account has some access, somebody who has to sign, some village head has to see it, he has to approve it, and then it goes to the villager. I'm just simplifying. Also, I just made it like a 4-hop thing. It may be that there are many more hops. But today, through all the e-government process, the money is sent, the department decides, okay, 31st of the month, we send the money to the villagers, it's sent and the villager gets it in his bank account. Made available to citizens electronically by improved online infrastructure and by increasing the internet connectivity or making the country digitally empowered in the field of technology. Digital media literacy interventions increases discernment between mainstream and false. And the idea is this, right, again. So until now, it's the context of literacy, digital literacy broadly, just to get some background. But within the fake news also, if you actually increase the literacy rate of people who are consuming the content, a high probability that they're going to actually get the fake news correctly. Right? Whether the media literacy, so this paper is a digital media literacy intervention increases discernment between mainstream and false news in the United States and in India. So discernment is to differentiate between false news and true news. And this is a study that happened comparing two geographic location, US and India, where the media literacy rate interventions reduces belief in false news, where the media literacy improves respondents' ability to distinguish between them. Right? Reduce the belief, I don't believe the news, and ability to distinguish. One is in terms of believing the content, another one is differentiating the content. Scalable media literacy interventions can decrease the perceived accuracy of false news content and help people to better distinguish it from factual mainstream. So the idea is that if you start getting more and more people to understand and know this idea of definition, right? If you get more and more people use this well, I think it's not just about using it, right? It's also using it well, right? I'm sure the way in which you are using your email, find, evaluate, and communicate information using social media tools versus your parents, versus your grandparents are very different. If they start doing, but the goal is not about your grandparents use the same way that you use internet, but at least they should have some skills which is helpful. Scalable media literacy interventions can decrease. The increase in discernment remained measurable several weeks later in the United States, but not for India. So this, if you remember, one of the parts I talked about retention and transfer. Retention and transfer. So these are the important things for any learning science. So these are broader metrics in an area called learning science. I hope you're capturing all this. There's a lot of things that I'm saying as in not in the slides itself, right? Now I pointed out learning science. Sometime back I pointed out something called as warning science, right? So please keep a watch for these kind of ideas. Also, particularly, these kind of ideas can show up in your quiz, in your exam, in your activity. So please keep a watch for that. But learning science is an area where you study how effective methods for teaching are. For example, is this the best mode to teach you fake news identification? I'm giving lecture, I'm recording it, I'm putting it on a platform, and you're consuming it from the platform. Are there better ways to do it? But of course, there could be better ways, of course, but there is, are we controlled by the constraint, right? You're taking a online degree and consuming this content as and when possible. You're sitting and catching up on these videos in one shot in a week, whereas somebody could actually try and consume this content in a different way. We could actually teach people in a different way also the same content. But is this the best way? How do you find out what is the best mechanism to teach? That's what a learning science is. In that, one of the methods to actually study metric to use is the retention. I tell you something now, can I ask you 1 week later, will you remember? Can I tell you something now and I change the context or I ask a question slightly different? It's like our graded questions in that sense, right? In the graded questions, we don't ask you directly. Sometimes you kind of twist a bit, right? That's what a transfer is. The increase in discernment remained more in the US compared to India. So another important idea, which I think is a bigger problem in social platforms, is this idea called echo chamber. Again, you'll remember I mentioned this once somewhere in one of the weeks. Echo chambers. Echo chambers are the idea in which where you have certain views. Right, I believe that cricket is the best sport in the world. Right, I believe in something like this, and if that is the case, I end up becoming closer to people. My network is all of people who love cricket, right? So that is what an echo chamber is, and therefore the information flow within this chamber is actually very, very restrictive, right? You kind of speak to only people who are very similar to you. Then what is that you're going to learn new? You're not going to learn anything new, right? And it's also echoing, is because people who are in your group are very similar to who you are. So the information is only, you say something, they're going to agree. They say something, you're going to agree to it. Right? Make My Trip's co-founder and the chief operating officer posted saying that beef ban, if Hinduism takes away right of choice, I'd rather not be a Hindu, blah, blah, blah. He talks about some topic. And interestingly, if you see, the echo chambers is also very, very connected to polarization. Polarization happens because there's a lot of echo chambers on social media, right? A lot of content that we generate are actually only echoes that are happening. It is just repeatedness of the content that we see, which makes it echo chamber. Right? So if you see, an example of an echo chamber could be, right, certain types of views of people are all together, right? So let's take this example itself. This example of hashtag beef ban. If you were favorable, let's take all the Twitter handles who supported are in blue color, who protested against it are in red color. Now, that's how an echo chamber would look like. All of the people who are connected to, who are supporters, are all together. This is a very classical example of how echo chambers ends up affecting the network itself, right? Affecting the way in which information could flow. Just imagine if this person and, so to say, this person can interact. Today, there's no connection between these two people, right? I mean, why I'm taking these two people? These two people are more, so to say, popular people in the network, because more people are connected to them. The larger the circle, more people are connected to them. Right? So information flow from here to here is much, much harder compared to information flow from here to here. They're very influential people, but they are influential people within the network. Echo chambers are something you want to avoid, but I think echo chambers sometimes isn't so much natural in social media that it's going to be very hard to avoid echo chambers. So just some quick tips, and I think these tips are only effective when you actually apply in the broader context of your access to social media. Interact with people of different perspectives, which are not something that we do. We actually end up doing the reverse, right? We kind of look for people who are, I mean, if you look at when I give lectures or talk to people in large crowd, you'll actually see all the people coming from same college together, all the people who are let's say coming from same area together, they have friends together. All of this happens even within a everyday class, actually, and forget about a workshop, which happens once in a while. Everyday lectures I do on campus, students who come to class, they probably even come together and they all sit together. Check multiple news sources. If you're looking for any information, find a way to actually see whether you can verify the content from a different place. Do not ignore the facts if they are against your viewpoint. If somebody says that, look, cricket is not the best sport and probably tennis is a better sport than cricket, take it, hear it, understand it, but don't worry about it, right? If that's not your view, that's okay. And even though I'm giving you an example of a cricket and a tennis, please keep in mind these are connected to the topics that we're talking about in fake news, right? Somebody saying that beef ban, right? This topic of why did the beef ban happen, and there's some arguments that are going on. Don't just believe what's being spoken there. Tendency of the human brain to simplify information processing through a filter of personal experiences and preferences, right? Cognitive bias is the tendency of human brain to simplify information processing through a filter of personal experience and preferences. What I see, right, is only of the nature. All the things are just yellow color because that's the only experience that I've been having. General bias, right? Bias towards your friends. I'm sure if you just pause the video and think about the kind of biases that we end up having, right? Biases towards people around us, biases towards what's the background, biases towards educational background, how much they have studied, what is the kind of clothes that they are wearing, bias towards the kind of words that they use when they speak. Right? Too many biases happen in our society, right? That bias also affects the way that we consume the content from anywhere, particularly the social media also. So the biases that we have in terms of fake news is we actually act without reading, we like it, we retweet it, we think that they are right. Popularity cues affect acceptance. The content that you're seeing is actually showing up in multiple platforms, and multiple platforms are actually getting them liked and shared many more times, and therefore you start believing them. It's true. It's also implied truth effect is playing here, but also showing up in many times and getting more popularity is also a effect here. Pernicious impact of partisanship. So partisanship also, right? Because you don't want to accept the views of somebody else, particularly opposite side, you are actually biased. Persistence of inaccuracy. Inaccuracy we also spoke, right? That it is repeatedly showing and it is occurring, it is wrong, and therefore we start believing it. The bias of inaccuracy actually shows up that we start believing the content. So that was some, so to say, roundabout ideas around the content that we need to know for figuring out a fake news. We'll actually tie this to the next part also. If you were to build a solution, how can you use these, right? How can you use the bias idea? How can you use the implied truth idea? How can you use the partisanship idea in terms of actually building a solution? If it's not directly evident, that's okay. Come back to us. I'll be happy to explain how we actually can take this in terms of building solutions. But here are some people that I used for building this content. For some of the work is also referred here, but these are the people that you can start looking at if you're interested in taking this work further, this idea further, this understanding of social science side of fake news. This is David from MIT. This is Gordon from Regina. This is Nilanjan from CPR or Ashoka University. This is Sumitra from School of International Service. Right. So these are the sets of people. I mean, by no means this is actually a comprehensive list. This is only a set of people that is referred in the deck of slides or doing some interesting work that in this space you can actually start looking at. So that's the thing. We'll stop here, but as I said, next what we'll do is we'll actually figure out how to spot fake news in the next part. Right? Thanks for listening, and feel free to ask us any questions if you have. But the idea until now, what we have covered is fake news. What is fake news? Some understanding of the kind of features that are available in social media to detect fake news. We'll come back to that later again to use them well. But in this part, we actually look at different ideas like partisanship, bias, echo chamber, implied truth effect, all of these ideas which can be applied in terms of detecting fake news. Thank you for listening.